In a small, dusty village lived the Ease family, Mr. Chima, Mrs. Ngozi, and their two children, Chidi and Adiz. Their house was nothing more than a broken hut with cracks on the walls, and when it rained, the roof would leak, soaking everything in sight. The floor was made of date, and the only light they had came from the flickering candle they shared at night. Every day was a struggle. Mr. Chima, a tall and weary man with hands rough from years of labor, woke up before the sun. His stomach growled, but there was nothing to fill it. His only hope was to find work. But each day, he was turned away. "Sorry, we've already hired enough workers," the engineers would say, their faces blank. "Come back tomorrow." Mr. Chima didn't give up. He walked to every site, to every corner of the village. But the answer was always the same. He had no choice but to return home, empty-handed. Mrs. Ngozi, exhausted and worn, sat at the door, praying that today would be different. Every time Mr. Chima came home without food, her heart shattered. She tried to hide her tears, but they were always there, waiting to fall. The children's eyes would look up to their parents with hope, but their bellies ached from hunger. Sometimes, when there was no food at all, Mrs. Ngozi would cry quietly, clutching her stomach. "God, please give us strength," she would whisper. She fed her stomach with tears, but even those couldn't fill the emptiness inside her. The children's clothes were torn. Adiz wore a dress that had patches and stitches that never quite matched, and Chidi had shoes with holes that let the rain in. The other children laughed at them. "Look at the poor East children," they would say. "They can't even afford new shoes." The laughter stung, but Adiz and Chidi kept their heads down. They didn't want their parents to see the hurt in their eyes. Mrs. Ngozi tried to smile for them, but it was becoming harder every time she saw the look on her children's faces when they had to go to bed without food. Her heart broke. She would sit by the fire, not to cook but to warm herself, holding her crying children in her arms. There was no one to turn to for help, and nobody came to visit them. The neighbors avoided them. The village was full of whispers, and Mrs. Ngozi heard them all. "Don't get too close to the Eases. They're so poor. They'll drag you down." Every night, she would pray for a miracle. She didn't know how much longer she could watch her children suffer. One day, Mr. Chima returned home with a glimmer of hope. "I found work," he exclaimed. "It's a small job, but it's a job." The family gathered around him, their eyes wide with disbelief. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next days were full of tiny steps forward. Mr. Chima earned a little money. It wasn't enough to buy new clothes or pay for school, but it was enough to eat. They no longer went to bed hungry every night, but the scars of their suffering were still there. The children still couldn't go to school. They couldn't afford books, and their uniforms were still torn. But Chidi, the oldest son, had something inside him that no one could take away. He had a dream. He would lie in bed at night, staring at the stars, and promise himself that he would change their lives. "I won't let my family stay like this forever," he would whisper to himself. Chidi would sneak to the local library whenever he could. He borrowed old, tattered books and studied late into the night. Even when he was teased for not having the right clothes, he kept his head down and focused on his studies. One day, a miracle happened. Chidi received a scholarship to go to school, to change his life. His family couldn't believe it. After all the tears, after all the suffering, someone had finally seen his potential. Chidi worked hard, and by the time he reached university, he had earned a reputation for being one of the brightest students. He graduated with honors, something no one in his family had ever dreamed of. He got a job in a big company, and the first thing he did was use his salary to pay for his sister Adi's education. He sent his parents money to make sure they were comfortable. The family who once begged for food and wore rags now lived in a decent house. They were no longer hungry and no longer ashamed. But Chidi never forgot what they had been through. He knew it wasn't just about the money. It was about the strength, the courage, and the faith that his family had shown even in the darkest times. His parents, Mrs. Ngozi and Mr. Chima, no longer cried. They held their heads high, proud of the children they had raised. They had suffered, but now, they had everything they had ever hoped for. Chidi's journey to success had been long, full of sacrifice and heartache, but now, it seemed like the world was finally opening up for him. The scholarship, the new job, the promise of a better life, it was all within his reach. But in the midst of all this progress, something inside Chidi began to change. The city life was different from the village. Everything was new, and Chidi was suddenly surrounded by people with money, luxury, and power. He was no longer the poor, struggling boy from the village. He was someone now, someone who was getting attention. At first, it felt like a dream. He bought new clothes, took part in the flashy nightlife, and started spending his weekends at nightclubs. The people he met there were charming and lived a life that seemed so far away from the struggles he had known as a child. They didn't care about the sacrifices he had made to get here. They just wanted to party, to live without boundaries. And Chidi, hungry for more, followed them. He was introduced to a group of young men who claimed to be successful, men who lived on the edge, always pushing limits. They told him, "You've worked so hard, Chidi. Now it's time to enjoy life. Forget about the past. Live for the moment." And for a while, it seemed right. Chidi went from one nightclub to another, drinking, dancing, and living a life he had never imagined. He became someone he didn't recognize anymore. As the weeks passed, he began to change. His clothes became fancier, but his heart grew colder. He stopped calling home as often. When his parents tried to reach him, he would ignore their calls or give them short answers. "I'm busy," he'd say, his voice distant and harsh. Mrs. Ngozi's heart would break every time. She had worked so hard to raise Chidi, to make sure he didn't forget where he came from. "Chidi, please, come back to us," she would cry on the phone, her voice trembling. "Don't forget your roots. Don't forget the struggles we've been through. You've come too far to throw it all away." But Chidi didn't listen. He was too caught up in his new life. He was no longer the humble boy who had studied late into the night by the candlelight. He no longer thought about the days when his mother cried because they had nothing to eat. He no longer remembered the pain in his father's eyes when he couldn't find work. All of that seemed distant, as if it belonged to another person, someone he was trying to escape from. Each time his mom cried, her tears felt like knives to her heart. She would sit by the window, staring at the sky, wishing her son would come back to the family she had worked so hard to protect. "I wish we were still poor," she would whisper through her tears. "I wish you were still the child I raised. This scholarship, this success, it's tearing you apart." His dad, Mr. Chima, too, felt the weight of Chidi's decisions. He remembered the long, sleepless nights when he begged for work just to feed his family, the days he came home empty-handed with nothing to offer but his love. How had they gotten here? How had their son turned away from everything they had fought for? "I raised him to be better than this," Daddy Chima would say, his voice full of pain and confusion. "We wanted him to have a better life. We wanted him to help others, to make a difference, not to be lost in the same darkness we fought to escape." Chidi's behavior became worse. He no longer cared about his studies. He spent his time at clubs and began drinking heavily. His friends would laugh at him when he told them about his parents' phone calls, mocking his upbringing. "Your parents don't know what they're talking about," they would say. "You've got to enjoy life while you can." He started to forget who he was, the boy who studied by candlelight, the boy who once dreamed of changing his family's life. He didn't care about his future anymore. He didn't care about the people who had sacrificed everything for him to get this far. His mom would cry herself to sleep every night, wondering where she had gone wrong. "This isn't the son I raised," she would sob into her pillow. "This isn't the Chidi I knew. Please, God, bring him back to us. Please don't let all our sacrifices be in vain." The neighbors who had once looked down on them now whispered. Chidi was given everything: opportunity, education, success, and now look at him. He's just like everyone else. He's no better than the poor boy we used to know. In the silence of the night, his dad would hold his mom as she wept. He didn't know what to say anymore. He didn't know how to bring their son back. He had dreamed of seeing Chidi succeed, to build a better life for their family. But now, all he could see was the boy he once raised, lost to the world. But no matter how much they cried, no matter how many prayers she said, Chidi stayed on his reckless path. He had everything: money, friends, freedom, but he was empty inside. He didn't know what he was looking for, but the more he tried to fill the hole in his heart, the more it grew. The sun had barely risen when the knock came, loud, heavy. and frightening. Bang, bang, bang. Open the door. Police. Mrs. Ngozi dropped the pot she was washing. The sound of it clanging against the floor sent shivers down her spine. Mr. Chima rushed out of the room, confused. Before they could say anything, the door burst open. 3 policemen entered, their faces stern. "Where's Chidi Ease?" one of them barked. He's in the city," Mummy Ngozi stammered, her hands trembling. "What happened? Is he okay?" "You will hear the rest at the station," the officer replied coldly. By afternoon, the news spread like wildfire. Chidi had been arrested. The young man everyone once celebrated, the scholarship winner, the pride of the village, now accused of a serious crime. They said he had stolen company money. Others claimed he was involved with bad gangs who scammed people and laundered money. Nobody knew the truth, but everyone talked, and not one of his so-called friends came forward to defend him. When his parents heard the news, they could hardly breathe. His mom fell to her knees, tears running down her face. "No, not my son. My Chidi cannot do such a thing." They rushed to the police station. When they saw Chidi behind bars, tired, dirty, and broken, Mrs. Ngozi's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. "My son," she whispered, holding the cold metal bars with trembling hands. "What happened to you?" "Mama," Chidi said softly, his eyes red from crying. "I didn't do it. I swear. I don't even know what happened. They said I was part of the group that stole from the company, but I had no idea anything like that was happening." "Then tell them," she cried. "Tell them the truth." "I tried," Chidi whispered, "but nobody believes me. All the people I call my friends, the ones I partied with, the ones I helped, they've all disappeared. None of them will even pick my calls." He buried his face in his hands. The reality hit him like a hammer. All those nights of laughter and loud music. All the money he spent showing off, all the fake smiles and shallow friendships, they were gone. All gone, and now, when he needed help the most, nobody stood by him, nobody except his family. Back home, the neighbors who used to envy them whispered again. "Didn't we say it?" That boy was too proud. Success entered his head. His parents spoiled him. Each word was like fire burning through his mom's heart. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every night she cried, rocking herself to sleep. "This isn't the son I raised," she wept bitterly. "Oh God, if I knew this is how it would end, I would have preferred we stayed poor. I would have preferred hunger over this shame." Mr. Chima tried to stay strong, but tears filled his eyes whenever he thought of how far they had come, and how quickly it had all crumbled. He remembered the days when Chidi would sit outside, reading under the moonlight. He remembered his son's promise, "Papa, one day I will make you proud." Now that same son was behind bars. In the cold cell, Chidi sat alone, replaying everything in his mind. He thought of his mother's trembling voice. He thought of his father's tired eyes. He thought of Adiz, who had always looked up to him as a hero. And suddenly, everything became clay. He realized he had thrown away the one thing that mattered most, his values. The lessons his parents had taught him, the faith that had carried them through poverty, the love that had built their family. He had abandoned it all for empty pleasure. For the first time in years, Chidi fell to his knees. He cried, not for being caught, not for being accused, but for the man he had become. "Mama, Papa, I'm sorry," he whispered to the darkness. "I lost my way." He remembered the small house in the village, the smell of firewood, the laughter of Adiz, the songs his mother hummed when she cooked, even when there was no food. That was home. That was love. And now, sitting alone, surrounded by cold iron bars and silence, he realized that all the money and glamour he had chased were worthless. He had everything once, not wealth, not fame, but peace, and he had traded it all away. Tears streamed down his face as he closed his eyes. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if anyone would ever believe him. But one thing was certain: he wanted to change, that he wanted to make things right. Even if the world never forgave him, he would fight to earn back the love and trust of his family. The same family who had never stopped believing in him, even when the world turned its back. Chidi's time in that cold, dimly lit cell felt like an eternity. Each day, he sat by himself, his thoughts swirling in a storm of regret. His once confident and carefree demeanor had crumbled into shame and sorrow. He had been accused of something he didn't do, and though he tried to prove his innocence, the truth seemed to be slipping further from his grasp. But one evening, something unexpected happened. A kind-hearted lawyer, who had heard about his case, decided to represent him. This lawyer believed that Chidi deserved a chance to clear his name, especially after seeing how his family had stuck by him. The police had not done a thorough investigation. Chidi's so-called friends had framed him, making sure he was caught in the chaos they had orchestrated. But now, the truth was starting to come to light. After several weeks of hard work, Chidi was finally released from jail. The moment he stepped out, he was greeted by his family, his father, his mother, and Adiz, who were all waiting outside the police station with open arms. Though they had suffered, they never gave up on him. Chidi's heart swelled with emotion as he saw their faces. His mother, her eyes red from crying, pulled him into an embrace, whispering, "Thank God you're free, Chidi. We never stopped praying for you." He held her tightly, his own tears mixing with hers. "I'm sorry, Mama," he said, his voice breaking. "I lost my way. I wasn't the son you raised. I made so many mistakes. But I promise you, I will change. I'll make it right." Over the next few weeks, Chidi slowly began to rebuild his life. He moved back home with his family in the village. It wasn't easy. He didn't have the money or status he once had, but he had something far more important: the love of his parents and the strength of his own determination to change. He found work at a local workshop, learning the craft his father had once done working with wood. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Every day, Chidi worked tirelessly, not just to earn a living, but to earn back the trust of his family. He spent nights reflecting on his actions, working through his guilt, and finding a new path for himself. But the most painful lesson came when he saw the hurt in his father's eyes. Mr. Chima never once raised his voice in anger. Instead, he quietly worked beside him, teaching him the same lessons he had learned from his own struggles. "Chidi, life is not about how far you can go or how much you have," his father would say. "It's about knowing who you are and never forgetting where you come from." Chidi also spent more time with his mother, whose tears had dried, but her love for him had never wavered. He began to help Adiz with his studies too, wanting her to have the opportunities he had almost thrown away. The village that once whispered about them now looked at them differently. Some respected Chidi for owning up to his mistakes. Others saw him as a symbol of redemption. But what mattered most was that Chidi was finally living a life worth living, not for anyone else, but for himself and his family. One evening, as the family sat together for a simple dinner, just beans and rice, Chidi looked around the table at his family. His heart was full. He realized that no amount of wealth, fame, or partying could compare to the peace and love that filled their home. This was what mattered. As they ate, Chidi spoke up. "I don't know where I'd be if it wasn't for all of you. You never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself. I want to promise you, from the bottom of my heart, that I will never forget where I came from. I will make sure I honor the sacrifices you made for me." His mom smiled through her tears. "My son," she said, "we've always believed in you. Your journey may have been hard, but it was always meant to teach you something important." And then, with a quiet, heartfelt voice, his dad spoke. "Chidi, never forget, true success is not in what you have, but in who you become. You have the power to change your story." Moral lessons to learn from this story is that success without humility is hollow. Chidi's story teaches us that no matter how far we go or how much we achieve, we must never forget where we came from and the values that shaped us. Success is not just about wealth or status. It's about staying grounded, remembering our roots, and treating others with respect. True friends are the ones who stand by you in hard times. Chidi's friends from the nightclubs disappeared when he needed them most. This shows us that real friends are those who are there when life gets tough, not just when it's easy or fun. The importance of family. Through all of Chidi's struggles, his family never abandoned him. His parents, though disappointed, never gave up on him, proving that family is the greatest support system we can have in life. No matter what happens, they are the ones who truly care.